Welcome back to the deep dive. This time, we're taking you straight to the heart of the Old Testament, the formation of the Sinai covenant. As described in Exodus 19.1, 20.21.
Right.
You might think. It's just about a bunch of ancient rules. But trust me, it's way more than that.
Okay.
It's a powerful story of love, responsibility, and a relationship that still resonates today.
Absolutely.
To unpack all of this, we've got some incredible excerpts from an in-depth Bible study to guide us.
It's incredible how these ancient texts can be so relevant to our lives today, isn't it?
Absolutely. So picture this.
Okay.
The Israelites have escaped slavery in Egypt. They've been wandering for 3 months, and boom, on the 50th day, they reach Mount Sinai. Now, why is that 50th day so significant? What's the deeper meaning there?
Well, the number 50 holds a lot of symbolism in the Bible,
Mm.
often representing completion or fulfillment. Think about Pentecost in the New Testament. The Holy Spirit descending 50 days after Easter. The Israelites' arrival at Sinai
Right.
on the 50th day could certainly be seen as a moment of spiritual culmination. But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The Sinai covenant itself isn't just some casual agreement. It's structured like a formal treaty, specifically a suzerainty, vassal treaty.
So kind of like a powerful king making a pact with his subjects.
Precisely.
Oh,
And
right.
it's not just some handshake deal either. These treaties were highly structured
Oh, wow.
with specific parts, almost like a modern-day legal document.
So God is laying down the law, literally, in a way that would have been clear
Yeah.
and binding to the Israelites.
Exactly. There's a preamble,
Right.
identifying God as the authority figure,
Okay.
a historical prologue, reminding the Israelites of everything God has done for them, like,
Yeah.
freeing them from slavery.
Right.
And then we get to the heart of it, the ethical stipulations.
The rules of the agreement, so to speak.
Right. And like any good contract, there are sanctions, blessings for following the rules, and consequences for breaking them. And finally, you have provisions for how this agreement will carry on to future generations.
Wow, that's a lot more structured
Yeah.
than I initially imagined. So God is establishing his authority, but also making a very deliberate, long-term commitment to the Israelites.
You got it. And it's important to note, this wasn't like the pacts God made with Adam or Noah.
Yeah.
This was a corporate covenant, establishing Israel as a kingdom of priests
Yeah.
and a holy nation, God's treasured possession. This was a unique relationship, unheard of in any other ancient culture.
Okay, so we've got this formal agreement, this chosen people. How does this covenant actually happen? Was there a signing ceremony with snacks or?
Let's just say the signing ceremony was a bit more dramatic than that.
Okay.
Imagine God descending onto Mount Sinai with thunder, lightning, smoke, fire, you name it. There was even a trumpet blast so loud it probably made everyone's ears ring. It was a full-on sensory overload, meant to inspire awe and fear, a powerful display of God's presence.
Sounds a bit intense. Maybe skip the snacks for this one.
Definitely not your average meet and greet. This theophany, this visible manifestation of God, transformed Mount Sinai into a holy place with restricted zones and all. It's like God drew a line in the sand, saying this is serious business.
Makes sense. You don't just casually stroll up to a mountain when God's throwing lightning bolts around.
Right.
So where do the famous 10 Commandments fit into all of this?
They are the heart of the covenant, the ethical stipulations we talked about. In Hebrew, they're called the 10 words. And they're not just random rules. They cover everything from what to believe to how to act and how to worship. A complete guide to living a righteous life.
It's like God is providing a blueprint for how to build a society based on values, not just on power or personal gain.
It's fascinating how St. Augustine numbered those commandments, emphasizing both our relationship with God and with each other.
Speaking of those commandments, let's dive into that first one. No other gods before me. Seems pretty straightforward.
Right, it might seem simple on the surface, but this commandment goes way deeper than just avoiding idols. Think of it like a marriage. It's about exclusive loyalty and giving God your whole heart.
So even letting other priorities take precedence over God could be a problem.
That's a key takeaway here. And think about this. The first commandment also highlights the impact our individual choices have on future generations.
Wow.
It's saying our actions today can echo through time, affecting our children and grandchildren.
Wow, that's a powerful reminder of the responsibility we carry.
Exactly. Our actions have consequences that extend far beyond ourselves. And this is just the first commandment. Imagine what the other 9 have in store for us.
This is already blowing my mind. I'm ready to unpack the rest of these 10 commandments. They're sounding way more relevant than I ever realized.
I think you'll be surprised at the depth and wisdom we'll uncover. As we continue, the Sinai covenant might be ancient, but its message has a powerful resonance, even today.
Okay, so we've established that the Ten Commandments aren't just some dusty old rules. They're packed with timeless wisdom. I'm ready to dive into the rest of them. Where do we go from here?
Well, we've talked about that intense love and loyalty demanded by the first commandment. Now,
Right.
let's move on to the second commandment, which focuses on respecting God's name.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the weight and holiness of God's name and not using it lightly or disrespectfully.
So it's more than just avoiding profanity. It's about treating God's name with reverence.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the power and majesty associated with God's name. And interestingly, in the new covenant, Jesus takes this even further, telling us to avoid oaths altogether.
Because our word should be our bond, right? We should be people of integrity whose yes means yes and no means no.
Precisely. And speaking of shifting perspectives, the third commandment about keeping the Sabbath holy is another fascinating example of how the covenant evolves.
Okay.
In the Old Testament, the Sabbath falls on Saturday, but in the New Testament, it shifts to Sunday.
That's a pretty big change. What prompted that shift?
Well, Sunday is the day of Christ's resurrection, the ultimate victory over death, and the beginning of a new creation. So for Christians, it became the Lord's Day, the day to gather, celebrate the Eucharist, and reflect on the core of their faith.
So the core principle of dedicating a day to rest and spiritual reflection remained. But the specific day shifted to reflect the central event of the Christian faith. It's like the covenant itself is adapting and deepening.
That's a great way to put it. The Sinai covenant isn't static. It's a living testament to God's ongoing relationship with humanity. And that brings us to the fourth commandment, which bridges our relationship with God and our relationships with others.
Okay.
Honor your father and your mother.
It's like the bedrock of a strong family and, by extension, a healthy society.
Absolutely. Respect for parents is paramount.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to note that this commandment even comes with a promise of long life.
Oh, wow.
But, diabolic, it also has broader implications. Think about how in the church, the faithful are considered children, and priests and bishops are seen as fathers, guiding and caring for their spiritual family.
It's amazing how these commandments have these layers of meaning that extend beyond the literal words. Okay, let's move on to number 5. You shall not kill. This one seems pretty self-explanatory, but I'm sure there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're right. It gets straight to the heart of the sanctity of life. It recognizes that all life is sacred because it ultimately comes from God. We don't have the right to take a life that we didn't create. Of course, there are nuances to this. The Hebrew word used here actually refers more specifically to murder, to unlawful killing.
Okay.
Self-defense and just war are recognized in both the Old and New Testaments.
So it's not a blanket ban on all forms of taking life, but a clear condemnation of taking a life unjustly. It's about recognizing the inherent value and dignity of every human being.
Exactly. And the placement of the sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery, right after, you shall not kill, is really interesting.
It really emphasizes the gravity of adultery. It's not just a personal betrayal, it's a societal offense. That undermines the very fabric of a healthy community.
You're spot on. It breaks the covenant of marriage, which is a sacred bond established before God. In a way, it echoes that first commandment. It's about fidelity, loyalty, giving your whole heart to your spouse, and the consequences for adultery. In the Old Testament were incredibly severe. It was often punishable by death.
Wow, that's intense. It highlights how seriously adultery was taken. And of course, Jesus raised the bar even higher in the New Testament, saying that even lusting after another person in your heart is a form of adultery.
It challenges us to go beyond just outward actions.
Yeah.
And examine the state of our hearts, our innermost desires, our intentions. This is about striving for purity in all aspects of our lives, not just our actions.
It's a call to live with integrity and to cultivate pure motives. Yeah, on to commandment number 7. You shall not steal. It seems like this commandment, along with many of the others, goes beyond just the literal act and speaks to a broader principle.
Absolutely. It's not just about shoplifting or grand theft auto. It's about respecting private property, about honesty and fairness in all our dealings. It's also about recognizing that material possessions are not the ultimate goal in life.
It seems to be pushing back against greed and that desire for more, which is so prevalent today.
That's a great observation. We are called to be stewards of what we have, not hoarders or exploiters.
Right.
True wealth lies in our relationship with God and with each other. And that ties in beautifully with commandment number 8. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor.
So basically, don't lie, especially when it comes to legal matters or situations where someone's reputation is at stake.
Yes, but it goes even deeper than that. It's about ensuring justice prevails, about being truthful and trustworthy in all aspects of our lives. Think about it. If everyone could just make up stories in court, chaos would ensue.
It would completely undermine the foundation of any just and stable society.
Exactly. And remember, Jesus is called the truth in the Gospel of John. He is the ultimate example of honesty and integrity, someone whose words and actions were always in perfect alignment.
So it's about striving to live in a way that reflects the truth of who we are as children of God. It's about letting our actions match our words and living authentically.
Beautifully put. And that brings us to the final two commandments, which are a bit different. They both deal with coveting.
Okay.
Commandment number 9, you shall not covet your neighbor's house.
So this is about recognizing the danger of envy and greed, of
Yeah.
constantly wanting what we don't have.
Precisely. And it's not just about material possessions. The 10th commandment broadens the scope. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or his maidservant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
So it's about respecting boundaries and being content with what we have, rather than letting envy and desire control us.
It's a challenge to cultivate gratitude and contentment in a world that constantly bombards us with messages of more.
That's such a crucial point. And St. John identified 3 types of covetousness in his first letter: lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life.
Those sound familiar. Aren't those the same temptations that led Eve to sin in the Garden of Eden?
Exactly.
These are those primal urges, those deeply rooted desires that can lead us astray if we let them. The 10 Commandments, taken together, paint such a powerful picture of how we are called to live. They're a blueprint for building a just and compassionate society, a society rooted in truth, respect, and love.
It's amazing how these commandments given thousands of years ago are still so relevant today.
It speaks to the enduring wisdom of the Scriptures and to the unchanging nature of the human heart. We still struggle with the same temptations, the same desires that the Israelites faced back then. The 10 Commandments provide a roadmap for navigating those challenges and living a life that is truly fulfilling.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to how much wisdom is packed into these seemingly simple laws.
I'm glad to hear that. And, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to explore and unpack within the Sinai Covenant and its implications for our lives today.
I'm ready to keep diving in. What else can you tell us about the Sinai Covenant and how it relates to us? In the 21st century, it's mind-blowing to think that these laws given thousands of years ago still hold so much weight in our lives today.
And it really is.
So how do we, living in the 21st century, actually apply these ancient principles to our modern lives? It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We might not be standing at the foot of Mount Sinai with thunder and lightning crashing around us, but we each have our own mountains of encounter with God, those moments where we're confronted with His presence, His power, His love. They're all around us if we're paying attention.
You're right. It could be in prayer, in nature, in a moment of quiet reflection, in a conversation with a loved one, those instances where we feel a connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And just like the Israelites entering into this covenant with God, we're constantly making covenants in our own lives.
Yeah.
Every promise we make, every commitment we uphold, it's a form of covenant.
It's about being intentional with our words and actions, recognizing the weight they carry.
Yes, and the 10 Commandments offer a guide for us. As we navigate those choices, they help us discern right from wrong, encourage us to choose the path that leads to life, to love, to truth. They're like a moral compass for our journey.
It's like they provide a framework for building a life of meaning and purpose, not just for ourselves, but for our communities and the world around us.
And they remind us that we're not alone in this journey. We have God's guidance, wisdom, and grace to support us every step of the way.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. I'm starting to see the Sinai Covenant in a whole new light. It's so much more than just a set of rules. It's a story of love, responsibility, and a relationship that continues to shape our lives today. What's one final thought you leave our listeners with?
The Sinai Covenant wasn't just about laws and punishments. It was about establishing a profound relationship, a bond of love and loyalty between God and His people. And that same invitation is extended to each of us today. Are we willing to answer that call? Will we choose to enter into that covenant of love, to let God's word guide our steps and shape our hearts? That's the question I'll leave you with.
That's a powerful question indeed, one that deserves careful consideration. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Sinai Covenant. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deeper into the mysteries of faith and life.